Gordon House, and the mill is the Lee and Gordon's mill. It still can grind grain, and it's important as a crossing of the Chattanoga Creek main draw. It's a place that General Crittenden's entire corps has been there since the 13th day of September. Now, Crittenden's corps at that time, the army is scattered over about a 30-mile front. When Crittenden left at the Gordon's mill, the army left, and the army's right with Brooks Cavalry, and Trouble has been put 20th Corps are down at Alpine, 30 miles away. But in the period between the 14th, 15th, and 16th, the army has come together, closing in on General Crittenden. Thomas being in the center, near Pond Springs, and on the right, General McCook. The cavalry under General Stanley, Chief of Cavalry, will be covering the right, with the cavalry division commanded by General Cook. Union cavalry will be on the Union extreme left. Mitty's brigade being at Reed's Bridge, Alexander's Bridge, Wilder's mounted infantry. Wilder's mounted infantry belongs to Reynolds' division, so they are not a cavalry division as such. They're mounted infantry attached and are an organic part of Reynolds' division of the 14th Corps. Reynolds, when his division takes position in the defense line, only have two brigades are going to be with me. Now we're going over to the Gordon's mill.
Surprising that we would have thought that Chickamauga was named after the battle, as opposed to the other way around. What her parents were. I can see 950 of John Road. Officers.
So we're now going almost
through 419. What's your plan?
Taking the 14 so they're definitely in the Gordon's mill. Then across Peavine Creek, Peavine Church. Peavine Creek is a small stream. It is an adequate name, Peavine. One that has got about 50 horses to urinate, equals about a water carrying them. And it will join the old federal road, which follows the alignment of the interstate highway going to Atlanta. After it gets through Ringgold Gap, and then it goes to Ringgold Gap, and then crosses into downtown Chattanooga. It was a line of the interstate going to Atlanta. We're now crossing the Lafayette Road. This was the super highway of that day. The south of Chattanooga through Ross's Gap to the village of Rossville, skirts the Gordon's mill, and then on Lafayette. Then from Lafayette it proceeds on south to Somerville and eventually to Rome. Now, back in the late 1980s, they're going to put a bypass for Lafayette Road through the west end of the park. our director of Park Service said was Mr. Mott, who worked for the Park Service in the 30s, was well into his 70s. And his idea was, what was the Bay of Road? Was it paved during the Civil War? And I said, no, it was a dirt road during the Civil War. How about making a dirt road today? That was an upright in the city, town, north and south of the park. They did build the bypass and discouraged the traffic.
The bridges today.
All right, we're following the historic road now, the Bay of Road. These are monuments to various Union units elected by the commission that was in charge of the park in 1890. The park's created and it's transferred from the War Department to the National Park Service on August 10, 1933. Now, if you see pictures of the wartime mill, it's very similar to the one they rebuilt here after the war. So the mill at that time is similar to the mill at the time of the Civil War. The one was burnt before the war is over. The gate is not open.
We get the bus can open that gate.
So we're now crossing the main prong of the Chickamauga Creek.
Give me a copy of that right there.
So we're crossing Chickamauga Creek.
Yeah.
East Chickamauga Creek flows through Rainbow Gap, coming in from the east. West Chickamauga Creek we crossed after we, just before we approached Davis's Crossroad.
Yeah.
Now the Confederates, one thing they have no trouble about water. Granted, they don't worry about pollution. They don't know that those little wiggly things that they control in the water will kill more men
It's not in the paper.
There's not no typhoid and dysentery, desperation by
Something like that. Take it with me.
listeners writing, really fast stories, they would know that
Look at it on the internet.
things that are invisible except by the microscope and the walk up there are more dangerous. So the Confederates, the battle is fought west of the Chickamauga. Right. So the Confederates they didn't fill their canteen. A lot of the Union troops would go 3 days without canteen. Now that philosophy continues in the United States will late Korean War. You'll find Alexander Bridge and Reed Bridge and Dyer's Bridge. There is no action at Dyer's Bridge. The action is at Reed's Bridge, which you remember when Forrest fell back, as men cried up fighting from Reed's Bridge and Dyer's Bridge, leaving the stringers in position, the abutments in position, in case the Confederates should come back. So the first people that are going to reach the Reed's Bridge are going to be men from Forrest's command, followed by Bushrod Johnson. A Initially, Reed's Bridge is defended by just Minnie's brigade, but during the day, they will be reinforced by members of Flowers.
That's what it was. Almost on Burning Bush Road. Steps up the bridge.
Wilder's brigade, the Lightning Brigade. Wilder had been captured at Butlerville, and the Union debacle there on the 17th day of September 1862. And surrendered with about 5,000 men. And when he comes back to duty in his exchange, he will go to the banker in Springfield, Indiana, and make a loan from the bank, and go out and buy 1,500 Spencer rifles, and using the letter of credit from the bank, will pay for it. He pays the price of $34 apiece, and the men will pay for it. And then he hopes to collect with the men. When you collect with the men and are paid, they always withhold from your pay what you owe the government, or with Wilder, your commanding officer. So there was really no hope, no worry about getting repaid. The only thing he has to worry about is one of the soldiers got killed and his wife is leave poverty and doesn't have any money. Unless he cut it. So they have to pay for this country. At the same time the fight is taking place at Reed's Bridge, a similar fight will be taking place down at Alexander's Bridge between Fall Falls, Mississippi Brigade, one of the two brigades in St. John Liddell's division. These men had all been part of the Army of Relief, and they have been sent here with William Henry Alfred Walker, and they've been in North Georgia since the 3rd day of September. And they brought about 7,000 men in two small divisions with them, William Henry Alfred Walker, and it's going to be the Mississippi Brigade is going to get the honor of attacking the Union troops defending Alexander Bridge, commanded by General Walthall of Mississippi, and a future United States Senator. And after taking 105 casualties, they'll say, "Old Mike, S-H-I-T, we can't get across here," and they will move downstream near the Bryant's Ford, midway between Alexander's and Bridge and Dyer's Bridge, and cross there. So by late afternoon, approaching of dusk, the Confederates will have seized Reed's Bridge and have seized Alexander's Bridge. So step one of Bragg's attack is working. They're across the river on the east side of the Chattanoga. Meanwhile, Butler's people are waiting for Reed's Bridge and Alexander's Bridge to be secured before they begin crossing at Thetford's Ford, when it's already getting dark on the evening of the 18th. Polk's men will not cross at Dalton's Ford until the morning of the 19th. Nor will Gill's men cross the Chattanoga until late afternoon on the 19th. And Claiborne's men will only get into action a little before dusk on the 19th. kind of cloudy over there, or maybe it's raining, because you can see, look out in the distance. It's enveloped pretty much in the clouds. Maybe it's even rain. Yes, you can see Lookout Mountain over there. See it? You can see Point Park. It's like the head of a whale. So the thing that Bragg had in mind, if he had not delayed for Longstreet's men, he would have been across, he would have attacked on the 7th. So he just postpones everything 24 hours. They were expected to happen. He found that the Union resistance is stronger than he expected. Remember, as Jim said, the Confederates have postponed one day, 24 hours. I was ready for Jim to start speaking in an English accent when he mentioned Colonel Mitty. So Mitty's brigade is assigned to watch the other side of the river here. Remember, he's already gone into where Ranger is. And Wilder's brigade is assigned to watch Alexander's Bridge. Now the people down below cannot cross. The Confederates have to cross these in sequence. Johnson should be across here relatively early on the 18th, but Bushrod Johnson is snake dead. He takes the wrong road from the Ringgold area and is going to be pushing the noon hour before Bushrod Russ Johnson gets here. And of course, the attack by William Henry Talbot Walker, the force of crossing at Alexander's Bridge, has to be done in sequence to the forcing of the bridge here. Buckner will not even try to cross the river down at Bedford's Ford until they have secured these two bridges. And Bishop Polk, as we find, is not the most active man at 57 years old. He will not even try to cross at Dalton's Ford until Buckner's across. So the resistance here is going to put the Confederate attack considerably behind schedule. Also, Wilder, because of the use of the Spencer rifles, you got to make sure it's Spencer carbine. And the carbine has the same problem in the Civil War as it has in World War II. If you're armed with a carbine and you run into a Japanese or German soldier armed with a rifle, you better take him the first shot. In other words, he's got your tail because of accuracy and range. So Wilder's going to have, he's going to have enough guns, he's going to be able to send some of them up here to help Mitty out. And Johnson is going to not force the bridge here till quite late in the afternoon, about the time that John Bell Hood is arriving on the scene to take command. Meanwhile, Walthall is not doing well down at Alexander's Bridge. As Mississippians are finding, the Spencers are tough nuts. Wilder's are good soldiers. And after losing less than 110 men, it may also indicate that Walthall hasn't got great enthusiasm. 110 men is not a great number, unless you're one of those 100. So that means that Walthall, that means that he has to look for another crossing. And he'll move upstream to near Bryan's Ford, halfway between us and Alexander's Bridge, where there are no Union soldiers. So it's, instead of being across relatively early in the afternoon, it's going to be late in the afternoon before they have secured Alexander's Bridge and Reed's Bridge. Anyway, when they even when they forced the guys to pull back, they got to put the planks back on. Remember, Forrest left a good clue he plans on coming back. When he left here at the beginning of the second week in September, he removed the planking, left the stringers in position. So they will cross. Now remember, when they cross, they're going to move west. And then they have to pivot and start moving south. Why are they doing that? They've helped to help uncover the other crossings, Bedford and Dalton's Ford. It means that they're not going to get much further south than the intersection of the Brotherton Road and the Jay's Mill Road by dark. So the Federals have done a fairly good job. They put the Confederates way behind time before they finally secure this. But again, we see this is part of Rosecrans's holding action. Bragg's decision to wait Longstreet's arrival, and that's going to mean that Rosecrans knows and has a good time warning to get Thomas moving up the Dry Valley Road. And that means by daybreak on the morning of the 19th, Brannan's brigade it reached the Widow Kelly's field. Their Federals are in position where their flank now overlaps the Confederate flank. So instead of the Confederate flank overlapping the Union left flank, the Union right flank overlaps the Confederate. The Union left overlaps the Confederate right, and we'll let Jim take it over. Maybe he'll give us a sample of this English accent.
Well, I don't do English at all. Well, actually, I guess it's a little bit. My outhouse and about is actually the remains of the old Southern English accent. So, what I mainly want to do here is just say a little bit more about the ground. As Ed said, this is for 20 years now. There's been talk about some conservation here at Reed's Bridge, but we just haven't been able to get the conservation organizations to really make the final push. Right now, we are on some county-owned right-of-way right here. Modern Reed's Bridge is this concrete and steel structure right here. In a few moments, we're going to move just a little bit further downstream where we can see the banks of the creek a little bit better. And as we do, those who want to, not everybody can go at once. If we could, we'd be standing down there already. But those who want to can go down this little path just a little bit further. And there you will see some cut limestone block abutments. They are from the 1900 bridge that the Park Commission built when the National Military Park owned Reed's Bridge Road all the way from the battlefield to Ringgold Gap in Ringgold. That 1900 bridge replaced a wooden structure which was essentially the 1890s version of the Civil War wooden structure. So if you walk down here, you'll see the limestone abutments, and just to the right is where the wooden bridge was located at the time of the war and even up to 1890. Some of the wooden timbers of that last wooden bridge are still in the bottom of the creek, and the water level is low enough right now that you can actually see them out there in the creek. But that's where the wooden bridge was. There are right now, to make viable greater public access here and preserve a portion of this site, there are really three private players and one public player. Catoosa County that owns this property right here. There's a machine shop right here that is closed and for sale. Then there is the piece of property that Ed talked about that is in an estate. That is mostly on the other side of the creek. We'll see the two lovely, dumpy little cinder block houses that are on that property when we cross the creek ourselves. And then there is a larger estate back behind it. And in part, it is that estate, as Ed said, and then the fact that we're also dealing with this property and the other, the multiple pieces of property here has been somewhat of a factor in why nothing has gone forward. There are a couple of other factors too, but I'll not get into those right now.
Main factors are that Jim, having the lead, had it all pretty well solved because they had the money in hand. And the Conservation Fund could pay more than fair market value for the land.
Yeah.
And it would have all happened, except that time, I think, the estate.
Right. They couldn't get the estate worked out, and at that time, 20 years ago, not very many conservation organizations had gotten so savvy as to buy out partial estates to essentially become one of the players in the estate. That's done more commonly now, but at that time, not many people were thinking about doing something like that. So it didn't happen, didn't go forward at that time. So.
And the trail was much wider down here in '96. I think 95% of the round table went down there, and I would recommend that probably 95% not go down today.
Yeah. If you walk down here, just be careful because your footing gets really bad. And again, the goal is to see the creek, not feel the creek. And, if you want to walk down there, you can. Not everybody at once. And then come down this trail. We'll gather up where we can see the bank of the creek. Folks can look at the bank of the creek across the creek from here. Chattanoga Creek is a major military obstacle. Not so much because of the width of the creek, not so much because of the depth of the water on the creek, but because of the steep, sharp banks. It is difficult to get organized bodies of creeks or organized bodies of troops from this side to the other side by simply trying to cross at any place. Because how are you going to get out on the other side over there? One or two people might be able to do it. But what if you're Bushrod Johnson and you've got a provisional division of 7,000 men in 5 brigades? And you've got all your wheeled vehicles. Can you get a Civil War period a horse-drawn wagon or ambulance or artillery piece across this creek? For that matter, can you get a modern Hemet or Bradley fighting vehicle into and out of this creek? Into, yes. Out of, no. And so Bragg, when he went to implement this plan, has got to aim these troops at fords and bridges. That's why something like Reed's Bridge and Alexander's Bridge become so critical to Bragg's plan, primarily for the organized bodies of troops and the wheeled vehicles. Fords, of course, are places where the bank slopes down enough to allow easy access into the water. The water is not too deep for whatever it is you're going to be crossing. The current is not too fast. The surf at the bottom of the water is solid enough to support the weight of whatever you're going to cross. And the material of the banks is such that it doesn't get turned into a real slick mud as particularly you come out on the other side. A Bragg, needing multiple crossing points, is going to have to send troops, particularly Butler's, Preston's, and Stewart's divisions towards fords. Dalton's or Hunt's Ford and Bedford's Ford. At the time, the water on the fords were about 30 inches deep. And that's really all it could be, because at 32 inches, you have the load-bearing surface of the wheeled vehicle. Believe it or not, in the last 150 years, the water depth on a Ford for all military purposes has not really changed at all. Even for our Army today, 2/3 of a meter is the minimum, it is the water depth if you're going to cross everything we have in our arsenal today. That's based off of the standard Humvees. This creek is a major obstacle for Bragg, and he has to select these crossing sites particularly carefully. So you've got Leeds Bridge right here as one of them, and then Dyer's Bridge, Dyer's Ford, but that one's not going to be really used. Alexander's Bridge, where we'll go in a few minutes, is the other critical one. Questions or observations here? On the look at the campaign is the Alexander House site. On this rise where we are was the farmstead of John P. Alexander. He and his 38 slaves are not around, however, in 1863. Alexander had participated in the beating death of a white man just before the Civil War, and had taken advantage of the disruption of the judicial system in Georgia by the war to relocate outside of the jurisdiction to avoid future prosecution for that. And so his bondholders, since he had skipped bail, his bondholders have become the owners of the property. James Lee of Lee and Gordon's Mill actually owns the 1,000 acres of land here that Alexander had. What happened to the slaves is unknown, whether he took them with him or whether he had sold them or what. But this was a large farmstead. And at the time of the Civil War, this road ran on off to the east, and from this road on this side, all the way down to the banks of the creek, was open ground. On this side of the Alexander Bridge Road was a large uncultivated field that stretched all the way to the west for about 3/4 of a mile. As we go that way, I'll indicate where the field ended. And on the other side of the road leading down to the creek was a large cornfield. When John Thomas Wilder became available to Rosecrans on September the 17th, and Rosecrans sent Wilder here to guard Alexander Bridge, essentially splitting the distance in half between Minty up at Reed's Bridge and Crittenden at Lee and Gordon's Mill. Wilder rode in from the west on that road that we'll drive out in just a moment, and Wilder arrived and did a quick terrain analysis, observing that this is high ground right here, observing that there are woods there to provide cover and concealment for his forces, observing the large fields in his front, the creek being an obstacle, the bridge being a choke point. He decided that his main position will be here on the top of the hill. He'll deploy his four of his 5 regiments on the edge of the woods. Eli Lilly will put 2 of his 3-inch ordnance rifles in amongst the buildings of the Alexander farmstead. He will deploy men along the banks of the creek down across the field in his front, and send scouts out on the other side. At the wooden bridge, they'll pull the planks up and stack the planks up on this side of the creek. Now, believe it or not, there's some people who get that answer wrong, but he stacks the planks up on this side of the creek. Here amongst the buildings of the farmstead, there are several tall trees. What did he do with the trees? He did not cut them down. He sent observers up into the trees. What are his scouts and his observers looking for on the afternoon of the 17th and the morning of the 18th? Columns of dust indicating the approach of Confederate forces trying to swing into this space between the main body of the Union Army and Chattanooga to the north. And If Bragg had gone on September the 17th as he had originally envisioned, would Wilder have been here? Probably not. But now on the morning of September the 18th, when Bragg begins his move, designated to cross at Alexander Bridge, is the small reserve corps under the command of William Henry Talbot Shot Pouch Walker. Walker's men are delayed in their approach because of a traffic jam down there at the Napier Store intersection, where Putner's and Walker's men have to pass through the same intersection. That will mean that it is noon before Walker approaches Alexander Bridge, and as he looks from high ground on the other side, what does he see guarding Alexander Bridge? Union soldiers. Now, he doesn't know their strength, and in fact, by this time, Wilder only has 2 regiments and 4 cannon here, not 4 regiments and 6 cannon, because with Minty under pressure, he has sent 2 regiments and 2 cannon up to reinforce Minty. Walker does not know that it is John Thomas Wilder's brigade of mounted infantry, but Walker knows there's a federal force here and that he's going to have to try to force this crossing. At 2 o'clock, he shakes out the almost 1,800-man brigade of Mississippians under Edward Carey Walthall and sends them towards the crossing. And as those Mississippians advance, Eli Lilly opens fire with those 2 3-inch ordnance rifles then in position, and he begins to deliver iron pills amongst those Mississippians, firing case-shot rounds and exploding them amongst the Mississippians. And some of the Mississippians begin to drop as casualties. As the Mississippians get closer, Eli Lilly brings up 2 more of his 3-inch ordnance rifles and opens fire with 4 guns against the Mississippians. As the Mississippians get closer, Wilder's men along the riverbank open fire with their Spencer repeating rifles. And then as the Mississippians get still closer, Wilder moves the 98th Illinois out onto the forward slope of the hill here in the uncultivated field, and they put volley after volley from their Spencers down there on those Mississippians. And as we said, or as Ed said, at Reed's Bridge, this is going to prevent Walpole from crossing here at Alexander's Bridge. He will look for another place to cross, Byram's or Lambert's Ford downstream, and will move in that direction. But to cross at that very difficult ford is going to cost him what? Time. And most critically, what Wilder has bought for Rosecrans and what Minty has bought for Rosecrans is intelligence. They have been reporting back to Rosecrans all morning. There are Confederates advancing to cross the creek downstream of our left at Lee and Gordon's Mill, and as Ed has related, that is going to allow Rosecrans that afternoon to issue the orders to Thomas to put troops on the road to extend the Union left flank further to the north in what turned out to be that nighttime march for men of the 14th Corps. Now, when Minty was forced back across the creek at Reed's Bridge, and Bushrod Johnson and John Bell Hood turned south on the road that we have followed from Reed's Bridge, they are coming in on the flank of Wilder's brigade, or at least Wilder's 2 regiments and 4 cannon that are here. Wilder feels the approach of Bushrod Johnson's men, and Wilder says, I'm going to have to abandon my position here. He also knows that Walker is now attempting to cross out at Byram's and Lambert's Ford, and there are sizable Confederates opposite Bedford's Ford and Dalton's Ford. But Wilder is not like Minty, Minty had swung into the saddle and ridden off into the west, into the sunset, and it's also in late afternoon. It's also what time? Tea time, since he's an Englishman. Minty had broken contact and gone to the rear. Wilder did not break contact and go to the rear with those 2 remaining regiments. John Thomas Wilder withdrew from this position out this road that we're going to follow, and just that dark stops Bushrod Johnson short of the critical Lafayette Road. And overnight, that primary route back to Chattanooga for the Union Army remains open. And while Thomas's men did not march up the Lafayette Road in their nighttime march, that road remaining open facilitated Thomas's men moving on the Dry Valley Road, which is just at that point less than 2 miles further to the west. And so Wilder, stopping Bushrod Johnson short of the Lafayette Road, ensured that the Union left flank, the Union route back to Chattanooga, remained open, which meant that Thomas could move across that area that night to thereby, on the morning of the 19th, essentially be on the flank of Bushrod Johnson's men, who will bivouac along this road just to the west of where we are overnight. Yes, sir.
What was the relative wounded death during that skirmish? You make it sound like the Mississippians were just standing there waiting for it to come.
Well, the Mississippians are going to suffer 105 casualties in 15 minutes' time out of their 1,785 men. Now, Wilder's casualties are almost impossible to figure out because they are simply reported for the entire battle. And only occasionally have I been able to find evidence of what day an individual soldier in Wilder's brigade became a casualty. And I've had to do that literally looking at that individual soldier's service record or pension record. Wilder simply reports his casualties for the entire battle, and I don't yet have a good breakdown by day. There are some here because we have some personal items from a fellow by the name of Bothwell, and he was wounded here on the 18th in this fighting. But I only know that because I spent $109 and got his pension from the National Archives. So. And in that, he specifies that I was wounded on the 18th in the fighting at Alexandria. Well, there are individual memoirs that mention some names, but there's not yet a complete compiled list. Rick Baumgartner, in his Blue Lightning, Wilder's Brigade in the Chickamauga campaign, expands that list and gets closer, but we still can't break down Wilder's casualties clearly by 18, 19, and 20. And then Wilder complicates it even more because in 1888, hearing that the War Department was about to publish the Chickamauga volumes in the official records, Wilder said, "Oh, War Department, you know what? I just remembered that report I turned in just a few days after the battle. Oh, I was sick. That's not a really good report. And so here, I want you to substitute this one, which makes me look a whole lot better in Chickamauga, for the one I turned in September of 1863. And there are dramatic differences between the two documents.
You have to watch yourself. You could argue that there are more casualties on day 2 at Gettysburg than there's Antietam. You can never prove it, but you cannot break them out.
Unless you start doing biography by biography of every man engaged.
And a lot of the Confederate service records won't show up.
Yep, they're not complete enough to do it.
You could never, that's something you could argue with Gettysburg fans, and you'll never prove it.
Okay, what we're going to do now is get back on the bus. We're going to go out this road. I'll have the lead bus do something to indicate where the field ended. Then I'll have the lead bus do something to indicate where Wilder stopped stopped Johnson just short of the Lafayette Road. And then we'll pick this story up tomorrow. So.